Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to have Paul Prado with me here today. He's the Chief of General Surgery at Valleywise Health and Medical Center, Associate Professor at Creighton School of Medicine, and real estate investor focused on single-family housing. I met him at a self-storage event here in town. I'm very pleased to have him here. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks for having me, Tim. Nice to see you.
Very excited to have you on the show. Very pleasantly surprised to circle back and talk about alternative investments with you, and somebody who's growth minded, who's eager to step out of their normal routine. And we were just talking about this a little bit of our professional biomedical backgrounds and also pursue other endeavors.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people out there is actually there's a lot more information about learning about finance, which I think most people have considered taboo before, and especially for medical professions. And I think it's a great topic to talk about.
Excellent. I agree. Thank you. So yeah, a lot of people would rather talk about sports or their sex life more than their finances, or right? It's kind of weird how things change. Also, it's sometimes tricky, particularly being in a highly demanding industry, or right, being a physician like you are. Some people are super achievers. They're always out doing stuff. I have friends, physicians who are climbing Kilimanjaro one week and then right in the OR the next week, and then, doing mission work in Honduras the next week. And they're just very active. And other people who are just in their lane and they're just spent, and they look at you like you're crazy if you're trying to go out and do something outside of what you've been trained in. And so you kind of get it from both ends. Has that been a challenge for you?
I think when I've looked at it in that aspect, every person's built differently. And so there's not one way of being your own character. And some people are achievers, and that if they're happy with that, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro while doing surgery the next week, while other people just focus, each person has their own right. And if they're happy, I think that's most important. Sure. But again, comparing yourself to other people, you want to make sure that you're comparing yourself to the person that you want to be in that 100%. Aspect, because you may get frustrated. It's like, you're only doing this and then other people are doing that. But if that's not your lane, I don't have any business to be that person. Sure.
Great answer. Yeah. If your peers bully you in the OR for, and I know people who do, right? They get a lot of flack at work. Like, you're a cardiologist. What the hell are you doing? Buying an apartment building, and then they usually come around after a while. But okay. So Paul, please give us a snapshot of where you're at right now and how you got there.
So I started my practice here back in 2016 after finishing my fellowship in Virginia, and then started as a general surgeon now, a year now being as the chief of general surgery. But one of the biggest things that I realized is I was waiting to start my life after training. And so you're waiting, and it's like, oh, I'm going to get that big paycheck. I'm going to live in a mansion. And then you get the big paycheck. And you've always worked yourself very hard to get where you want to be. And then you realize you're not there yet after all of that. And so
you're in a ton of debt.
Yes. Well, actually, since I actually came from the Philippines.
Oh, okay.
I actually don't have any debt on
well played.
Medical school, which is a good thing. However, when you realize, one of the things that I ask my friends is, how much do you need to retire?
Right.
And it actually baffled him because he never thought about it. And so I actually started reverse engineering, and I realized I would be saving my whole life for my retirement. And so I decided to figure something out and started in stocks, realized that it's one form of investment, but you're always going to be an outsider. So you think you know, but you really don't, and you're always going to be the last person to make a move. And so when I discovered real estate, bought my first house as an investment, even when I didn't even have a house back in 2020.
When you're renting yourself. Yes.
I was renting in an apartment. I says, I want to buy my dream house. I'll just rent. It's cheaper. Bought my first house, and you start realizing the cost of it. You have plans on renovation, and they always go off budget. And then you're looking at yourself like, well, if I sell this one right now, I'm going to go in negative with everything. And I said, I have to be patient. And I never really thought about it as an equity play, but I was looking at it as like, oh, how many houses do I need to actually get the cash flow to actually supplement my job? And from there, I said, I'm going to save up and then take the time to get more properties, but I really have to grab great deals because it's really hard to get a house that cash flows at least $1,000 or more. And
just a month in terms of rent,
yes.
Rent over any leverage financing payments you may have, or whatever the ROI you're anticipating.
Yes, exactly. And in that aspect, when 2 years came about, I realized that the more money that was generated was actually from equity. And, appreciation, sometimes people say, well, it's not true money until you sell it, which I do agree. But if you do look at the trend, and if you're willing to play the long game, I think most of the things that you have to understand is if you have the option to sell at your own time, that's the biggest luxury that you can have, because you can ride out trends or waves.
Yep, absolutely.
And so my focus has been from cash flow to equity play, and I started leveraging to accumulate more properties in the last year. And so in the last year, we bought an additional 6 properties.
Nice.
And that's a little bit of a stretch for me, but and from there, 3 of them are not cash flowing, but again, there's more than cash flow to a good deal, and understanding what you're buying is very important. And then the other 3 are 2 are cash flowing, and then the last one is going to be, I think it's going to cash flow more than my first property.
Okay. Well, there's a few things I'd like to unpack there. One is that some of us can be market dependent as well, right? I think sometimes rents go up and all of a sudden things start cash flowing well. Historically, you make money investing in real estate over time, right? If you're flipping it, that's transactional, it's a job, right? But if you're really investing over time, you need to hold it. And as you said, you don't really run into any trouble in real estate unless you sell when you don't want to. So if you can hold it and take advantage of the markets at your leisure, that's the prime position to be in. Also, you can do cash out refis periodically when things are good, tax free, right? You can take a bunch of equity out tax free. That's a great way to go for long term use as well. When you do build up enough equity and the markets and rates are low, why not, and redeploy it and get a better return on your capital, get it working as well as possible for you. Also, physicians, a lot of people who are really well trained and highly skilled in a particular field often did not get a well-rounded, like a financial background or training as well. And can you speak a little bit more about that?
Physicians, I think that number one, with all the training that we actually do, sometimes we think that actually goes with all the other things that we don't know about. So there's a false sense of security and overconfidence.
Well, yes, you're all very smart,
and I think that's the problem. So they don't want to accept the fact that they don't know anything about anything when it comes to finance, because they've been reading medical books all their lives.
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest problems, because I think my first rule is nobody should care more about your money than you should. And you'll see a lot of financial gurus, financial advisors. If they're trying to sell you stuff, that's their job. Whether you make money or not is up to you. And so you have to be able to be the best steward for your finances. And a lot of physicians are actually broke because they're trying to live the lifestyle that people think that they should be living. And they're not actually, they're partly burned out as well because they've been working all their lives to get to this point and they think they deserve it. But it is honestly a marathon. It's a continuous marathon where one of the people from White Coat Investor actually mentioned, it's like, if you could just live like a resident for the next couple of years, you would actually be able to save up more for your future. And then accelerate it at a lot faster pace.
Sure. Delay that lifestyle creep.
Yes.
For sure. So, yeah, you mentioned some more good things there. What do you wish you knew sooner in your own journey? Well, in your medical field and or in finances?
What I wish I knew sooner would be actually, I wish I didn't have limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs are partly that what my biggest limiting belief was, I was going to start earning when I am an attending or start investing when I'm an attending. But if I actually started saving money as a resident and started learning other ways to make more money or actually contributing just to a simple 401k, the compound effect in that on time is actually multiple compared to you trying to catch up. And there's so many skill sets that they don't teach you in medicine, which is one is communication. Number two is leadership. Number three, of course, most really important to us is finance.
Right.
And that those are things that are also should get emphasized, because you could actually go out and you could have actually done a lot more before you finish.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Very good. To your point earlier, also, a lot of the financial institutions, the traditional advisors telling you to put stocks and bonds and to buy their products where they get commission from, right? You're right. They don't care about your money the same way you do, particularly if they're not, if their compensation isn't based on performance, right?
Yes.
Even the ones that are fiduciaries get paid off in a percentage of assets under management, which if you lose money or make money, they still make money, right?
Yes.
And that's a conflict of interest in my opinion. I didn't like that. Once I dove in and started educating myself more about the things I've bought, right? And things some of my friends and I have some of my investors and are physicians who bought annuities, indexed universal life, all sorts of things, and they realized their advisors sold theirs, but we're still didn't advise them to sell theirs, right? When they got smarter and wiser and markets changed, etc. So yeah, having a good team around you, but you really need to educate yourself, which is I think the first step. And there's a lot to know, so it gets complicated. But I wished that's my thing. I wish I would have known earlier how great private investments were and that they were even an option. And real estate is the greatest wealth building vehicle on earth. It's created more millionaires than anything else. And I think it's very tangible, right? It's not rocket science. You just have to go take some initiative. Okay. So what's one of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome on your journey? Sticking with the investment theme now.
Losing money. It comes in different forms. Losing money in stocks when, 2020 came, pandemic, things change. So the question is, are you going to hold or sell? And then starting to buy houses and, renovation cost. When you plan, you get quoted. My initial renovation cost was $7,800. By the time I was done, it was $25,000.
Okay.
But the difference was I actually did my numbers up to $30,000, and I said, if I do this with a renovation up to 30,000, will I still buy the deal? Because I I love Excel spreadsheets. So I always do all my numbers before and look at all the
Okay.
scenarios to actually look at my projections, and then see and understanding, because sometimes people make it too sexy that
Sure.
they kind of hide all the problems, but it is a real thing that there comes good and there's bad.
For
And
sure.
you just have to accept the fact that you have to look at the long-term goal on why you're doing it to be able to do it day by day, or else you're going to quit when you're not ready to. Because one of our last projects that we did, I had a renovation budget of 15,000.
Mhm.
And so the quotation, and then my wife is my project manager, and we have
Okay.
different contractors. And then I says like, oh, I guess the papers were not coded in that one. That's 5,900. Okay, that's okay. We'll take care of that one. And then other ones was um, this contractor started slowing down. Well, time is money. You're paying for number one, if you're borrowing money, there's going to be interest on that money. Number two is, well, with the house not earning, I'm paying. So you want to finish the project as fast as you can to actually get it to monetize. And so she ended up getting another contractor. By the time everything was done, that added an additional 18,000 on top.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
but I've got two options. I could either get mad and then focus all my energy in a negative way,
Right.
or accept the fact that is as it is, and then just take a look. It's like, what can I do better next time? Which is understand the whole project, talk to the contractors, and then understanding everybody being on the same page,
Right.
and then start growing other skill sets that we can develop.
Absolutely. Man, more great advice. Have good reserves.
Yeah.
Was a big part of that. Those are some big ones.
Yeah, I think to that point, that is a very important thing, because as a physician, with things that you can liquidate, it is an asset. That's why, but if you don't, that will really stress out a lot of people. And 18,000 is, takes some people, if you're earning a W-2 job at 50,000, 18,000 is a big amount. So
Yes, it is.
it's not something to joke about in those scenarios. But I'm blessed in this aspect that, I would just bite the bullet.
Right. And well, first of all, do you manage the properties yourselves, or are you just sort of overseeing the renovations? Once you lease them out, are you continuing to manage them yourselves?
So the 6 properties that are currently running are we're managing it ourselves because they're long-term rentals.
Okay.
But the last project is actually a co-living. So it has 7 rooms, which is now being leased on a weekly basis. So we actually hired a property manager to manage that property, so we could be hands off, and my energy could be focused on acquisition.
Right. Okay. Okay. But I imagine your wife, for people who don't know, you can, as a case law in the US generally has stated that if you're a practicing physician, they're not going to give you real estate professional status, even if you put in the hours to prove it. But if you're married to a spouse who can put in the hours, then jointly you can be approved or qualify for that status for tax purposes, in which case what's normally a passive loss on your real estate can be turned into active losses to offset your W-2 income, right? As a higher income earner can be quite a boon. I imagine that's something you do.
That's exactly what I do. That's the golden nugget there. And that's why when my wife was asking me is, what's your reason for investing in real estate? And I said, everybody has a different reason, because it could be cash flow, equity, or tax deduction, and then debt repayment. And for us, it's an equity generation, but also tax deduction are going to be the forefront, which we actually benefit from.
Right. Right. That's you kind of have the trifecta there, really, because you can, depending upon how you structure the deal, you can have the appreciation and the equity growth as well as cash flow,
Yes.
and the tax advantages. So,
Yes.
yeah, it's very flexible. It's one of the reasons why it checks a lot of boxes for a lot of people, and is so popular.
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like things are going really well for you. What are you looking forward towards in the next 12 months, for example? What are your goals?
So right now is actually just stabilizing the properties. With the rates coming down, there are some properties that I bought at between 7 and 8%. And so eventually I'm going to be looking at the timing for refinancing this to actually make them cash flow. And then one of the ways we are actually purchasing is through VA assumptions. And so
Nice. Those are great loans to assume.
Oh yeah, and I think it's a win-win situation, because when houses can't sell and nobody's willing to pay the price that they're asking, and you come in, if they're willing to assign the benefit to you, and you can take over their mortgage under your name, then you could be paying a lower equity and getting a very low interest rate, and they can actually get their equity out from the house without getting a cut.
Right. So to clarify, well, actually, why don't you clarify what creative financing or seller financing is, subject to what is different words for it, and why VA loans are so great? Can you break that down quickly for listeners?
So there's multiple ways for creative finance, which is a very broad term. One is going to be seller finance, and there's going to be three things that you have to consider when doing a seller finance. One is going to be your purchase price. Number two is how much down payment they're going to be asking, and then what is your interest rate. All of those are combinations which you can actually manipulate to actually see whether you can cash flow or not on the property. You could have a 0% down payment, but if your interest rate's too high, then at a very high purchase price, it may not make sense. So it's basically a good math, but it has to make sense both for the seller and the buyer when you do a seller finance and have a good agreement on that aspect. For subject to, you basically do a takeover of a loan which stays in their name. So let's say you have a house and you're now going to go under on your house, and I see that you have a 3% interest rate and you bought it at a good price. And if I do it as a long-term rental, it will cash flow. And I say, well, I'll take over your loan. The title changes under my name. It depends whether I offer you any cash, if you have any amount of equity, or just to help you out. And then the loan stays in your name. And so we have to build a relationship in that aspect, because I will be controlling the account where the payment will go to the bank. So there is no loans under my name, but the title is going to be under me. The issue with that one is you have to have a good relationship with the seller, and you have to maintain that one. And if there is going to be issues, you could have a due on sale clause called by the bank in which they ask for the whole amount. And then you have other ways to move around it. The reason I love VA assumptions is it's very similar. The most important thing is, number one, you have to be qualified for it. Meaning the bank would tell you that you can pay for their loans because you have enough reserves and you earn a good amount of income. And what it does is, if you're selling a house and you have, let's say, 10% equity and you got the house at 3%, you can sell the house to me. We take over the loan, but the loan now changes under my name. And then the only thing I pay is actually your equity, which is if it's 10%, 5%, 20%, and then I get the interest rate. So that's how it's actually going to run. And there is no relationship unless I default. And then that affects the benefits of the veteran, which we don't want to do. But the loan is technically under my name, and I don't have to pay the whole 30 years. I continue the payment on where it is, which is if you're down at 25 years, I only have 25 years to pay. So
Right.
I think that's why we've been doing VA loans for the last 3 properties that we got, because the down payment has been between 8 to 13%, and our interest rates between 2.9 to 3.125.
That's the secret sauce for that play.
Yes.
3% compared to maybe 6% otherwise, which can double the payment on your note or your mortgage, which can make the numbers just not pencil or work. Okay, that's excellent. And so you're looking for more of those VA assumptions?
Yes. If by the time we actually, because of purchasing 6 properties, so I'm kind of capped. I have to wait
Okay.
for some seasoning. And then once the properties are rented for 2 years, then I can actually continue purchasing VA loan assumption homes. And
Okay.
these are houses on the MLS, as long as we offer to veteran-owned houses.
I see. Okay. Excellent. And so your goals over the next year or two is to acquire a couple more, or?
Yeah, acquire a couple of more houses, and I think we're looking on how co-living actually works, because it addresses an issue of
Yes.
affordability in the market,
Mhm.
and at the same time produces a higher cash flow. So it's a win-win situation both for us and the tenant. And so we're looking at how our first co-living is going to perform. And from there, if it does pencil out, then we'll continue to use it as one of our exit strategies.
Okay, excellent. It's becoming, yes, as you said, much more popular, particularly given the supply-demand issue in a lot of markets. Can you give a quick overview on what co-living is for people who may not know, and tell me, when did you start with your co-living property?
We actually just finished last week, so it's
Okay,
currently on the
fresh.
market. Yeah, very fresh. So what co-living is if you have a house, you basically rent it per room, and in some aspects, additional rooms can be furnished and placed. And so when you rent it per room, let's say you have a house that has 5 or 6 rooms, and you're renting it, your loan amount or your rental amount for the whole house is $2,500. That's what the market rate is. If you piece it by room, let's say each room rents at $200 per week, and at $200 per week in 4 weeks, each room would be $800 a month. If you have $800 a month, if you have like 5 or 6 rooms, at 5 year, you're going to be ending up with 4,000 when it's filled. If it's at 6, it's going to be 4,800. So from there, you could see the difference in them earning potential compared to a long-term rental. And in some aspects, other owners are actually doing additions with utilizing other square footage of the house, which may include the dining room and living room as a conversion. And these are things that increases the number of units that are available for rent.
Right. You sort of implied that you may be taking short-term rentals on those co-livings as well as medium and long-term. What sort of leases are you having people sign for those co-living model units?
So the platform we're using is actually Pad Split. And
Okay.
so what they do is it's a weekly, but when you sign up to for a new house or new room, you're obligated to do a 4 weeks. And so after the 4 weeks, then it continues to a weekly, but the payment is weekly as well, in which
Okay.
it's automated.
Okay. Excellent. And I'm not familiar with how popular that's been here in Phoenix. Can you speak to that a little bit?
It actually started in Atlanta, and now they've moved in different states. They started, I believe, maybe 1.5 to 2 years ago. And so when we actually first heard about it, I kind of shied away from it because I said, who would want to live in a house with other people? And I realized that I'm not the customer that
Right.
it's catering for. And so
Right.
when I started talking with other people who have it, it depends on the demographics. And
Yep.
if you look at the cost of an apartment here, which is going to be between 1,400, 1,500, and if you add the electricity, internet, and water, you're going to be maybe closer to 1,800 to $2,000. And if you compare that to a room for rent with all amenities included at
Right.
$800, it does solve a good issue for those people who may be transient, traveling for work, or are here and is just looking for a cheaper place to live.
Right. Are you catering to some properties? I know, kind of like short-term rentals, cater to a very specific demographic. Are you like traveling nurses? Are you having any sort of themed sort of rental property aspect for your property managers to select for tenants?
No, not for us. The only thing that we actually are particular about is whoever's going to be renting, we need them to actually have a job, because so that there's not going to be issues with missed payments. And what we're trying to avoid is any eviction.
Sure. Yeah. Tenant selection is always very, 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 very important.
Yes.
Does co-living have what's sort of the general property management split? How much of the rent do they take?
So
Have you seen?
let's actually start with the platform. The platform takes 8% once it's established.
Okay.
But before it is established, if you get a new tenant, they take the first 10 days. So
Okay.
that's going to be a third of your income. So the gameplay would be to actually keep the tenant as long as possible, so that you have lesser issues with turnover and the cost. Our property manager only takes 8% of the gross. So
Okay.
once it's stabilized, we'll be paying 16% to both, and then deducting both our mortgage and all the amenities. And hopefully, if it's full, we're going to be looking close between 15 to maybe 2,200.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Sounds awesome. Very excited for you. That's great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Dr. Paul Del Prado, thank you so much for your time today and sharing some insights and real estate investing tips with us. They've been great.
Thank you so much, Tim. Appreciate having me here.
Yeah. If people would like to connect with you, what should they do? Where can they find you?
They can find me in Facebook at Paul Del Prado, if you search for me, or in my YouTube channel at Paul Del Prado.
All right. Well, thank you for watching today. Thank you very much, Dr. Del Prado, for joining us. We appreciate you sharing all of your insights into real estate and practicing medicine in this crazy world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Inspired by our guests? Visit PhoenixProsperityPodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.